I have just been speaking to Steve again, our second conversation. And this time we go into the tree body a lot. And what did they call it? I don't even remember. There was some term of Steve's that he was referring to, but kind of playing with the other reality. There's this physical reality of where we are, how we are in the world. But then there's this entire inner landscape of to explore. Let's put it that way. And we do that quite a lot in here. We go in and we explore. Uh, Hopefully inspiring some of you who listen to this to try something new out. So dive in and have fun. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Helena. That's
Mm,
quite the mic you've got there.
It is quite the mic I've got there. Um, I've actually positioned it just so that the lamps that I have in the room behind me don't just show like really, really obviously on the screen because that makes it look so weird. So, plus it's actually better because I shouldn't be so far away from it, but can kind of normally be. So, yeah,
So you don't have to project as much.
precisely.
Shout to the
Precisely.
microphone.
Yeah. You're up early, but this is not you've been up for an hour or something already,
That's
I'm
right. I have. I've
guessing.
been up for an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah, I frequently get up at 5. Um, I find my body actually doesn't really give me much choice most days. I just wake up at 4:30, 5:30, something silly like that, and I'm just awake. So, so yeah, and I get up and write a little bit most mornings. I find it's a good time to do some writing that's not very premeditated, so I can
It
just
just comes.
get up and write stuff that just kind of comes from deeper without thinking too much about it.
Mm.
It's funny how much thought is the enemy of, or some kinds of thought anyway, are sort of the enemy of freedom, sort of a kind of creative freedom, I think.
So what do you those writings that you do in the morning, are those just for you, just for the heck of it? Just there's nothing like you don't do anything with them or
It varies. Most of the time it's active imagination sessions of one sort or another. So they're a kind of, they're a kind of depth journaling or image journaling. I have a interior world I've kind of been exploring for the last year that's got a very definite geography and definite places, many of which have got names now. Some of them don't. Some of them I just call by various things, but I don't know what their names are. Um, but there are places where I encounter my shadow selves, the different things I've kind of hidden or buried. So I do my internal family systems work there too. That another type of kind of psychological work. So most mornings I try to sit quietly and see if something will emerge or if I can get into that space and have things happen there. Um, if that doesn't happen, then other things will come or I'll have ideas. So sometimes the notebook does fill up with things that are, ideas for paintings or
Mhm.
ideas for something to write but most often I would say probably 3/4 of the time, it's something from that interior world. And it's the border between waking and dreaming in a lot of ways.
Mhm. Do you
So
record dreams too?
yes, yes, though not often anymore. I used to record them virtually every morning. And I don't as much anymore. I found going back and looking back over the dreams that they didn't build to anything. They weren't they weren't going anywhere. And it,
Did
they
you
felt
but
they
but
felt very
did you
random.
yeah, did you simply merely write them down or did you and you didn't do any type of dream analysis on them or with them?
No, no, I didn't. No, I don't usually try to analyze the dreaming part. I do some of that with the interior work,
Mm.
although even there, I don't think I would call it straight up analysis, but there's an awareness that things in that space mean things.
Mhm.
And the meanings will kind of come to me much the way the images do or the characters do that populate that space. Some of the characters recur. I see them often. And gradually I begin to understand what their role is in the space or what their role is in my life. Some of the characters are just parts of me. There's a couple of characters that I think are more complicated than that. And I believe they're actually partly me and partly from beyond me. So,
'Cause it's interesting, this thing of both the writing itself, where 2014, I got a lovely notebook by my then coach that I just started working with, Carla. And I started to write a journal every morning, but there's something in me that makes what I write want to be seen, published, so that usually what I write, I publish. I mean, on a blog post or something. It's like
right.
quite there's just a few things that I sort of hold on to for me, keep within me. So when I then finished that book, it was like, okay, it kind of frustrates me to write it by hand because then I have to retype it, you know? It's
That's
like, so
right.
I have a morning pages document instead that I kind of
Uh,
write in. And a lot of that, not everything again, and not everything gets finished kind of, but a lot
right.
of it turns into blog posts. Um, so I've and it turns into a blog post, even though that isn't necessarily my intent. You know, it's like it's not as if here I have this thing I want to write it and publish it. It's like I want to write and it wants to be published.
Right. No, I think I understand that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you begin just writing because you're writing. You don't have a goal in mind in terms of it being publishable or not. It's just that more often than not, it turns out to be.
Publishable. Yes.
Yeah. And how much shaping do you need to do of them afterwards before you get the really, editing or whatever, before they're really ready to be put out?
So I would say that they probably need more than I give them. That's
Well, I think that's true for everybody.
that's one of the things that I'm uh, a little lackadaisical about. It's like I can, I just kind of skim it and put it out there. But doing story skills workshop last year, a year ago, um, I actually kind of saw that pieces do get better if you kind of sleep on them and if you share
Oh,
them and get some feedback and clarify and stuff like that. So I've I would say I still don't do that enough or as often as maybe it could be warranted. But on the other hand, kind of having gotten that insight, it
right.
does mean that I'm a little bit more careful with the pieces that I put out. I do try to read them through more thoroughly than I did before story skills.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
yeah. So
Reading, reading, reading your posts. Um, I'm always struck by the fact that I can hear your voice. So, personally, I would hate if you edited them to the point where that got lost at all. And you probably could edit them more and not lose that, I'm sure. But there's a kind of immediacy to them that is, I think, partly from the fact that they're not overly edited. So I don't know. It's like when I look at past paintings of mine and I see there's always many ways to look at them, of course, but one of them is to see it and think, oh, wow, I should have cleaned up that little section right there. Or that line is not, smooth. And I could have worked that a little bit. Or, the paint in that particular section looks a little rough and unfinished. And maybe I needed to have spent a little more time on that section. And then, but there's a, there's a degree of polish you could put into a piece of work that kills it.
Yeah.
Right. The breathing that it does as a piece of art oftentimes is from the fact that there's a little bit of roughness still,
Yeah.
or a
Yeah.
little accident or spontaneity.
And it's I just got the other week from Gail, who's also forward link. Uh, um, that same thing. She sent me an email back responding to one of my posts, saying precisely that I can hear your voice when I'm
Mhm,
reading this, and it's like this is so you. It's like it's very
mhm,
synced, which made me really happy. And you've said it before too, and it's like I think I've kind of my spoken voice and my written voice, they've kind of leaned together. They've come
mhm.
together because I started blogging. It's almost 10 years ago. In August of 2012 is when I started blogging. I've written a lot, but that has been just professional stuff. I basically haven't written anything other than boring reports and standard operating procedures and product test protocols and whatnot. But I've done a lot of that on the other hand, right? And it's as if having then written 2,500 blog posts, it's like it's it's coming together so that I think my I've written so much that my writing does influence what I speak or how I speak, but
Mhm,
also the other way around, how I
mhm.
speak influences the writing. So I feel that they've merged somehow.
Yeah, and when I read your writing, I hear you in, 2 or 3 different ways, and I'm kind of aware of that when I read it. Um, because there are other people that whose work I read, like Matthew Wordbank, for instance. When I read his work, I also hear his voice. I don't know that and again, you wouldn't be certain you're hearing their voice if you didn't actually hear them speak,
Yeah.
right? On Zoom calls or something else, right? But since I've had the privilege, of course, at Tankespjärn to be able to hear Matthew Wordbank's spoken voice, it's been wonderful then to read his work and hear, like you, I hear his voice. Um, but I'm also aware then sometimes when I'm hearing it, how I'm hearing it, right? So when I listen to you or listen to your voice, listen when I read, um, there's a couple of things. First, there's a way you use English, which is a little different, partly because I think it's not your first language, right? So as a result, you choose words or put words together a little differently particularly than I think than an American would do it. And those are delightful and absolutely different. Um, and I hear them when I'm writing by UK English friends as opposed to American English friends, I can hear or feel the more British influence in it. Um, or there's one other person I was just thinking of, and now it slips my mind. Anyway, so that's one thing. The other is you have a very specific way that you stack your thoughts up to get to where you're going. And you do it both when you speak, when you're telling a story to me here, for instance, and also when you write. And again, it's not like so different or unusual, um, that it's peculiar or eccentric in any way. It's not. It's a really organized and very, um, thoughtful approach. But there is just a particular it's like you're stacking blocks up and there's just a certain way that you tilt the blocks or something. It's Helena. And I hear that in there too. And then of course there's always, both you, Matthew, Linda McLaughlin, anybody that I read online, right? Um, there's a way, there's the what you're saying. There are certain topics that are of interest to you. And they have a particular shape or color to them as well, that after you read enough of them, you're like, oh, yeah, this is the kind of thing that Helena would write about. Or yes, this fits right in there next to this other thing over here. that I read 2 months ago, whatever. So it's all three of those things. I think that are ways in which your writing is very you. And I think I would have to believe that the 2,500 blog posts has a significant role to play in how clear all of that is, right?
Yeah.
Especially that last one where it's about topics of interest and how they fall into certain categories, but they're all very much, a set of categories that I'm not surprised to see or hear you writing about. I think that's something that comes with a lot of writing. Uh, as I guess the same for maybe my painting, where I've got 4 or 5 different kinds of work that I now do. And for a while, when I was doing that, it felt like I was all over the place. And now it doesn't feel like I'm all over the place. It feels like, oh, I just have, I have country houses in 3 different countries. So I just go to visit them from time to time. But
Mm.
I've done a lot of living in all of them now. And so they all feel like mine, but they're some of them quite different from each other, but they all feel like mine.
Yeah, and I agree, and it's fun to hear you speak about my writing and my speaking, putting shapes and colors on them. What I have done when I have looked at my writing and how I speak, but more my writing, I have put tones to them. I have put tempo. I have put
Uh-huh.
music into them.
Uh-huh.
But then I'm a choir singer. Well, I
And a
fumble at the
dancer.
guitar. I dancer. Yeah. So it's like I come from that. And so it's fun to hear you putting colors and in like that is that is your tool, right? That is your
Yeah.
skill set. That's the way you
Yeah. That's
come at
my,
the world.
that's my yardstick.
That's your yardstick precisely. And it would be fun then to see if somebody who's I don't know, who's a sculptor, what would they how would they like would it be more 3D somehow? Uh
Yeah. Or a landscape architect.
yeah, yeah, gardener.
Right.
Would it then be different
Right.
types of gardens or parks or it's like
That's
this is
right.
the wild one or no, this is very ornamental and
That's
baroque
right.
garden, whatever, right?
Right. Or someone who
Uh
writes travel logs. Right.
yeah, yeah,
Would they
yeah,
describe it in terms of different sorts of external environments,
yeah.
Oh, this sounds like a Spanish plaza.
Yeah, yeah, precisely, precisely. It's like, and I I so enjoy that, and I'm gonna tie this together to the dreams because for the past year I've been writing down dreams, not all of them, but some of them, and
Mhm,
then I've been bringing some of those into my process-oriented therapy.
mhm,
And Dominic is quite skilled at, he's done a lot of dream work himself for many, many years. And he's a really good therapist as well. So with him, these dreams kind of grow in dimension. They reveal things that just land in me as, oh, this was the message. Not in analyzing, "Oh, here I'm wrong and I should be doing this," but rather it's like fleshing out a story. It's like I come with and my dreams are actually quite often quite detailed, quite
mhm,
they have that weird dream quality of like going from you're in this place context and then bam, something happens and you're in a plaza in Spain, and you don't know how that transfer takes place. And why are the people that you're now with, they weren't there just a fraction of a second ago, but they're quite detailed. But what we together can discover, uh, like stepping into these dreams, putting myself into them again with Dominic there as someone who, mirrors, asks questions,
Hmm.
shines a light on, opens a door. Um, it's been really, really interesting too, because it feels as if some of them I've had a pattern recurring in dreams for many, many years of not being on time, missing the bus, the plane, the train, the whatever. We did a lot of work with one of those themed dreams, and bam, it's like, now got it. It's like finally, after 49 years, I got it. Like message received, right? And since then, I think I've had one dream like that. Uh, that wasn't as frustrating as they usually are. They are
Uh-huh.
usually so frustrated. I wake up and my like heart's pounding and I'm so distraught
Yeah.
at this. And this time, and it was like half a year with none of these dreams, and then I had it not that long ago, and it was not at all that same distraught in me. It was much more of a, ah, yeah, I remember that thing. Um, so it was more like just a little reminder, just a little flashback. Don't forget that thing that you saw. So I've been really helped by, like I say, I wouldn't say analyzing. I would say stepping into them. Like,
Yeah.
just thinking about, okay, there's a cup in my dream. What does cups mean to me? What's in the cup? How am I what's going on with this
Right.
cup? Which I guess is a type of analyzing, but it doesn't feel analytical analyzing. Maybe that's the thing.
Yeah, you're not like mapping things to a definition or trying to identify things per
No.
se. All you're doing is letting them unfold,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Open further. It's like,
Yeah.
when you're there in the dream, the thing goes by so fast, and
Yeah.
you're in the experience. And then if you can step back from it, like you can when you're in a therapy session, right? You can step back from the dream and you've written it down. So you've got all details there to kind of recall them to mind. And you can step back. I've done this too. If you write a dream down, you can step back into it,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? It's,
Yeah.
by the way, it's the way that you find yourself awake, speaking to Dominic, but also back in the dream
Yeah.
and able to act in the dream. Like you could pick something up and look into it in a way that,
And feel into it.
yes, yes. But
Right.
there's also this way in which it feels like like almost like you're back in the dream and doing it again.
Yeah.
But only a part of you and the rest of you is like watching and talking to Dominic,
Yeah.
right? It's it's that it's that split sort of that's required to do the AI work, the active imagination work, the deep, the
Mm.
deep, the deep journaling, where a part of you is able to be in this place. I refer to it. I think other people do too. Arthur Mindell refers to it this way also. It's being in the dream body.
Yeah.
There's a dream body that's able to act also, and you can train yourself or get to a place where you can let your dream body act as spontaneously while you're awake in that space as when you're dreaming. So you don't have to be asleep to
No.
let it act.
No. Precisely.
It's hard though to keep to not interfere, to merely observe and write down, and let it unfold. And it's easy to lose the contact or lose the to interfere in the freedom in a way that the whole thing just kind of shuts down. It sort of collapses almost like a balloon popping.
But
Um,
it's interesting. I mean, the process oriented therapy that Dominic does, that is Arnold Mindell's stuff.
oh, okay, okay,
Yeah. So he's the inventor of this way of doing
okay, okay. I did not know
therapy.
that. Okay,
Yeah. So it was fun to hear you pop his name because it's like,
yeah,
yeah, that's it. Right. So that's what happens. It's like Dominic observes me. I observe myself because I also have that
Hmm.
thing, but he observes me, he picks up on hand movements, or he senses into that my stomach is
Uh-huh.
just clenches. So he encourages me, stay with this. If I'm moving my hands in a particular way as I'm talking, he goes, okay, stay with that. Move your hands more that way. What's there?
Yes.
What is that thing? Right. So it is an amplification of of like both the words, but also the movements and also the feelings, the energies that are like very much there and part of this whole thing. Uh, and it's yeah, it's fascinating.
Hmm.
Um, and again, it's fun too. I mean, this is what I love, right? I love this aspect of finding more of me, because that's the feeling I have. It's like I find more of
Yeah.
me when I'm doing this, and I find more of me doing it together with Dominic than what I would if I didn't do it together with somebody else. And that's
Yeah.
why also these conversations are so important for me, because when I share thoughts I've had, what experiences, etc., it's like I I I flesh it out, me out somehow. It's like I find
Yeah.
more of me in it.
Yeah. It's like you realize that, well, I'll go back to an example, a very recent example from my own interior work. I've been, exploring this internal space. And at one point, it dawned on me that I have been spending all of the time in one direction only from the place that is considered, that I consider to be the center of it, and never anything in the other direction. So it's like an entire half of me was just missing, wasn't even there. And at one point, I had a breakthrough where I discovered not only that that half was there, realized that while doing the session, but also realized that entire section, that entire half is dark. It's never day there. It's always only night. I mean, it's not a bad thing. It is a place where I've hidden some of the things I most want to keep hidden from myself, but it's not a, it's a friendly kind of dark space, night space. I didn't realize that at first. And I found it very difficult to penetrate that space and get into that space at all, to have my dream body actually go there.
Mm.
And then the things I've been encountering on that side don't work the same way as the things I encounter on the other side. The things I encounter on the other side they're not always verbal, but they always translate readily into words in some way. So I'm usually able to describe what things are, or what they mean, or what the shadow characters I encounter, the shadow parts of myself that I encounter, are trying to say. Sometimes they do speak in words, but it's very seldom. But even if they don't, the gestures and other things are all very obvious. Um, not so much on the darker side. On the darker side, the night side, there are lots of broad poetic gestures, and they don't add up to anything in particular that I could figure out. Um, some of them actually make me feel like I've almost had a physical change in my body when they occur, in my real body, my physical body, once they've occurred. But I couldn't begin to tell you what I think just happened there. I could describe for you what happened because it's all very visual. I can, I've written down what went on, who did what they looked like, how it felt even in some cases, but I don't know what it means. And that's unusual for me because I had another friend recently tell me that almost all of my work and all of my writing and thinking all seems to be about finding meaning, taking things that are not
Mhm.
immediately apparent and then finding the meaning, you know? And I'll do it with obvious things too. I can be Mr. Obvious for sure and state the thing that everybody else already knows. But for me, I'm just looking at the stuff and saying, look, it's this. And and I'm just so struck by that I have to say it out loud. So, but I can do it too with things that are not obvious at all. Um, and that's that's apparently a gift of mine, and I've used it for teaching, and I've spent a lot of my career teaching and mentoring and guiding. And then it all makes sense. But on this night side, I, I couldn't tell you what the meanings are. I can tell how meaningful things are sometimes, almost like on a scale or to a degree, right? Like it was a temperature reading I could almost take, but I couldn't describe to you what it's about. Not really. And that's been fascinating in its own right. Um, it also had never rained there. Never. It's an outdoor space. It's got a town in the middle of it. Um, but it's never rained there. So it finally did because I made an effort to experience things that would allow that. And it did finally rain there. And the riverbed that's been dry all along finally had water flow through it. And the riverbed turns out to be what connects the night side and the day side. And there had been almost no congress between the two because there had never been any rain.
Mhm.
So, it, and again, what does this all mean? I know that the rain is about some of the emotions I don't let myself feel readily. American males, males in many parts of the world have been trained not to experience things like grief or disappointment or frustration or, humiliation, those kinds of things. They're all things that they convert into anger instead. And then, and then from there, worse into action. And so, I know that for me, the internal rain and tears and those, what I call more passive emotions, the ones you have to just sort of sit with, I can't really do anything with them. Uh, they're linked. All of that's linked together. And so that's been a lot of the work I've had to do. Uh, when you spoke of anxiety and anxiety dreams, right? The not getting someplace on time or missing the bus or, um, our family refers to those. I think I've read about them as anxiety dreams. And they have a certain set number of combinations of patterns that are very common among people. If you talk to people about, I showed up and I was the only one not wearing trousers, or I could not remember the combination to the lock on my locker as a kid, and I can't get to class because, or I haven't been to class for the first 3 weeks of class, and I can't show up now, right? Or you're late for something and you can't.
Yep. Yep.
Those are such common forms of it. And they're apparently almost universal that people feel these. Now, what they mean to them and what they would unfold into if they could sit with them longer, I suspect would be different for every person. But we all have that in common. Um, I bring that up because in my interior space, anxiety is a character. Um, he, it is a he in my case. I'm very aware oftentimes of the gender of the different beings inside me. They're not all male. Um, the anxiety though is male. He shows up as a large rectangular hulking black figure. But if I can get a different kind of light shown on him so that I can see what he really looks like, he's a balding older man with a green bathrobe that doesn't quite fit, and he's wearing mismatched socks.
Poor thing.
And he's often sitting, and on his lap is a hot water bottle, and it's empty. Okay, so this is anxiety as he actually is in my space. And he shows up with a bag at his waist that hangs off his belt. It's a cloth bag, almost a stereotypical, Middle Ages wallet, right? It's just a bag of but it's not coins inside. It's knucklebones. So he and I have to play knucklebones on a relatively regular basis. If we don't, then the anxieties build up, and I just find myself feeling more and more breathless when things go wrong in the real world. I can't handle them well. But if we play knucklebones fairly often and I keep that bag fairly clear, we're okay. So what happens is he casts the bones. And when he does, I always have a sense of about how many there are, and if it's like 7 or 8, I've waited too long, but it's fine. We're going to deal with it now. Right. So I pick them up one by one and they always are something, and letting them be what they are and letting them find their place, and for me to understand what they are and then put them back where they go. which isn't back in the Knucklebones game, it's someplace else, is how I deal with that anxiety. I make it not a thing I'm not thinking about, but I turn it into something I am considering. And I do get some understanding of what it is that I've been worried about. Sometimes they turn out to be an anxiety only because I'm not acknowledging them. And they're really a fear. Fears and anxieties are different. As my boss tells me, sometimes fear is your friend. Fear is telling you you're not prepared or that you're not ready for something or that, something needs your attention. Um, Listen to that fear. Um, and if I don't, it will become an anxiety. It just becomes a sort of general feeling of dread that I haven't got a name even for. But if I can make it specific, then I'm like, oh, I'm worried about that meeting next week. And yes, I don't have my stuff together for that yet. Maybe I'll spend some time on that today. And when I do, the anxiety and fear both go away. Um, but others are not like that. They're just very, very general. For instance, just, my own death is one that shows up relatively often. I think most of us have some sense of our own mortality, even if we don't acknowledge it most of the time. And so that's one that shows up from time to time. There are anxieties about wasted time. I'm 61. There's many things I have not done that I would like to have. So I have a sense of that sometimes. Um, and the knucklebones are always, like I said, they're always a shape. Sometimes they become something I can do something with that I can keep. They're in my pocket now. They're a tool I can use. There's 5 or 6 of those now. Some of them are actually written on a piece of paper up on the wall between the windows of my studio here. And I'll walk over and look at it, and it'll say things, with what those are. And I'm reminded occasionally of them. And sometimes I look over there and realize, oh yeah, I need to use that right now on this.
Cool.
Some of them operate in the dream space. That's the only place they operate. Others, I actually have gestures or moves I make here in the studio with my real body in order to use that object here. It's all I I I think everything is a whole lot more deliciously complicated than we like ordinarily to make it. And this is all part of that.
It's so fascinating to hear you speak about this because it's so embodied. Listening to you, it's like this is embodied. This is you experiencing these things.
Yeah.
This is you
Yeah.
playing knuckle bones with
Yeah.
anxiety. It's like it feels very real. Uh,
Yes. It's extremely physical in a number of ways. The first time I ever encountered anxiety in that space and played Knucklebones with him, we were, let me back up. I had on a previous vacation done a whole series of small artworks. Several were small abstracts. One of them was on the wall right here behind me in the studio for weeks after that. And I only found out in some of the internal dreaming that that was a map. That was not just an abstract. It was a map. And there was a small red squarish shape in the center of it, which it turned out I had 2 weeks worth of encounters on that space. And I didn't know what that space was. I mean, I knew where it was in the dream space, but I didn't know until anxiety stepped out onto it and everything went dark because that's how he operates to light him up the right way. Everything went dark. The ground we were sitting on went red. And that's when I realized it was that shape. And then I also realized that it was my own tongue.
oh,
We were playing Knucklebones in a
oh,
space
your tongue.
probably 15 by 20 feet in size. And it was my own tongue. And that's where we were playing Knucklebones. So yes, it's very physical and sometimes it's extremely embodied. And all of that's relatively new for me. I mean, our last conversation, we were talking about, you know, being more in the body and doing things in a more embodied way, right? And you were counseling things like get out barefoot, which I have done. Um, and and me talking about how sometimes I just get up and freeform dance here in the studio in order to unlock something or unclench something or figure something out. Um, the the dream work had been always very, very visual and not very physical. And it's increasingly become more and more whole body experiences. You know, um, One of the times it was raining, I was lying on my back. The cold rain was falling on me and all around me. I was very physical. I mean, I was carried shivering up onto the boat and down into the cabin of the boat in order to be dried out afterwards. And I was so shivering by the end of it. So, so yes, it can be very physical. It's part of me hopes that at the end of life, we just sort of go off into that space in a deeper way and take up residency there. I don't, or maybe just dissipate off into that space. I don't know which. Either one, I would be content.
Mm. So this way of you, like being in relation with your dream body, in a sense, that's what I hear. It's like
Hmm.
it's you and your dream body. There's
Hmm.
there's action going on there. Is that something that is like new to you, or have you done that your entire life, or it's like,
It's relatively new. Back when I was in my 20s, I had read the Carlos Castaneda books about Castaneda books about Don Juan Matus,
mm,
the uh, Yaqui sorcerer, the man of knowledge. And the book Journey to Ixtlan has been a book that I've read many times over the course of my life. But while I read it, I was fascinated by it and it resonated with me even that very first time I read it. I didn't really understand the concepts being described in the book at all. Um, I believe the concepts in the book are probably possible or can be lived out in many different ways or different dimensions. But one of the ways I understand it, I think it's one of the ways Arnold Mindell understands it, is that is that the dream body is this internal being or part of you that has different sets of powers and different abilities. Um, and I think once I made that connection several years ago, no, it's been probably only 2 or 3 years. Um, the internal dream work and other work started taking on this much more uh, deeper meaning and deeper import. And once the painting started getting linked and mixed up with it, um, it was like, pouring jet fuel on it.
yeah,
Um, and then it's just gradually grown from there. Um, it feels like if I encounter anything that's got, I'll just call it the same thing that the books call it, power. If I encounter anything that's got power in it, the kind of energy, the sort of psychic energy that you can feel in things, then I know I'm onto something there, and I will explore that further. It's much the way, when Dominic is listening to you with one of your dreams, and he knows he can tell from cues you give him that, oh, there's a lot more in that right there, and so we're going to spend some time here. It's that you learn, and I'm sure you've learned it too, not just Dominic, right? You've learned where to sense where there's energy in something and you can work with that. You can learn how to work with that. Um, when I first started doing this too, it was like, am I just making this up? Is this just, pure fabrication? I don't know. Maybe it is, but I'm not all that concerned about that. And I could usually put that thought aside long enough to continue doing the work, which was important. Um, but now I'm fairly convinced that it's not just that simple. That when you read almost any of the world's great religions, and you quickly discover that at their heart and down at their foundations, there's this deep belief that we are much larger than we think we are. That the world we encounter every day is a very small thing we create with our rational minds for convenience, and then defend with all our energy to try to keep it rational. And the reality is actually not like that. It's more complicated than that. And also that we are one with everything else. And by that, I just mean the way I've been picturing it lately is that I picture reality being like the sea and each of the waves that pokes up from it and has a little bit of foam at the top, a little bit of white cap, right? Each of those waves is us, one of us. And all we are is just a little bubble up in the larger reality of things. It's all one ocean. We're all the same thing, but each of the wave caps is unique and has its own point of view. It's also very temporary. It's only there for a moment and then it's gone. And that's kind of what we're all like. In my mind, that's exactly what's up is that, and so I'm okay with going back into the rest of the ocean at some point. And I'm also really fascinated with and thoroughly enjoying being this wave right now.
Right.
Right. And exploring what else that means, which means that, I'm not just this wave, but I could consider myself to be the whole ocean.
Which reminds me, yesterday I listened to a pod. I found a couple of months ago, there's an Alan Watts Being in the Way pod that's
Yeah.
fairly new. And the eighth episode was released not that long ago. Well, maybe yesterday even. It's called Man and Nature.
Mm,
Man, it's a good one. Shit, it's good. And he points to this thing. He says, he speaks about it as if, you know, we're the universe. The universe is us. It's like
yeah.
we're we're all, and it's just
Yeah.
he just does it in such a. It was really, really. That's one of the episodes I'm going to listen to again and again and again because it was really uh, just opening in
Yes.
such a cool way into this understanding and bringing it home to what you speak to. It's like I am here doing Helena at the moment, right? And I'm all of the stars and all of the galaxies. It's like so
Yeah.
this the both and of that is just yeah, it was I truly recommend it. Uh,
So what's the name of this podcast?
Being in the Way, Alan Watts.
And you say Alan Watts?
Alan Watts.
Okay. I will definitely be looking at that or listening to that. Yeah.
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 He's I I so like him in so many ways. I spoke but I think me and Matthew and Inma in the second episode speaks about him too. But he has this way where he laughs at himself,
Uh-huh.
and I just love it because he's
Uh,
just so enjoying himself, not in a conceited way, not in a. He's just so there.
uh-huh.
And it's just yeah, it's. I get a lot of opening from listening to him.
Yeah.
It is. It is
Yeah.
cool. And this like it is this power thing in a sense. It is this seeing it, being in it or with it. And I wonder if it was there's an on being episode. I don't remember who it was with. I don't think it's Robbie Walkimber. It's somebody who sounds kind of like her speaking about Key or Chi. And
Yeah.
she maybe it was Robbie Walkimber. Regardless, whoever it was spoke about Key wanting us to use that as a word when we speak about the trees out there, that key over there, because it has that power rather than
Yes.
iting it, right? Just
Yeah.
so it's a way of saying he or she or key,
Oh, yeah. Okay.
which
I love that.
it was so interesting to listen to that thing. And it is this thing that we're speaking about. It is this life force. It is this energy um, that we need to honor. I think that's what she
Yeah.
kind of put onto it. If we it something, we are distancing ourselves from it and making it inanimate. It's like it's just an object. But if we key it, we bring it where we honor the soul of the thing, right?
Hmm.
It's like, so yeah, I'll see if I'll find that podcast and see. I'll put it in the show notes, but I'll send it to you too.
That's really
Um,
wonderful. That's wonderful. Yeah. When you, again, when I first started doing any of this, I was wondering again if it was like my imagination or was it something, was there something real here? Something besides me involved? Um, and this is what I would say to anybody who's interested in starting any of this kind of work, right? It, it grows. You begin with the smallest beginnings, acknowledging and stepping out of the rational into the uh, supernatural, the transcendent, whatever you want to call it, in the smallest ways possible to begin with. You just let yourself do something silly. And the Journey to Ixtlan is full of this because it's literally one chapter after another of Don Juan taking Carlos and embarrassing him out of his highly stuffy academic self, right? By getting him to do things like speak out loud to plants, talk to the plants, speak gently to it, tell it how much you love it, right? And, and Carlos can't do it. There's no way he can do it until
yeah.
he's frightened half out of his mind. And Don Juan says the only way they're going to probably get out of there alive is if he speaks to the plants. And then finally, he's down on his knees speaking to this plant for all he's worth. Um, but it's little things, and you'll get a notion that you could do something, and it might feel like ridiculous, or it might seem like, why would I do that? Um, if you let yourself cross the line into that space and do that thing, you'll find that the next time you get a stronger signal, you get more details, and it feels more natural. And eventually, it becomes more and more normal to do. The other thing is that eventually you can use it to overlap across the boundaries between the different zones. Now, you will eventually learn how to, I've learned how to allow that activity to get into my paintings. I can let my hands act from that space rather than from this one. That's my left hand, my non-dominant hand is particularly good at that. It's why I use it that way. Um, I also find if I draw with my eyes closed,
Mhm.
that it works better. That can come through more. I'm less able to interfere with what's coming through. Um, I have been able to hear things. We've talked about this before. I think I've been able to hear things from trees. I've had a very strong relationship with trees my entire life since I was very small. They've had a very special spot for me in all the living things, right? Um, and I've been able to hear from trees, sometimes almost in words. This is not a common thing. It's only happened a half a dozen times, maybe my whole life, but it's been a powerful experience when it's happened. But it happens more often now, and it's been happening more and more frequently because I accept it and act on it. Um, you make real these things by doing is what it is. And so anybody wanting to start this can begin at whatever way first shows up for them and then see where it leads. Honestly, for all of us, I suspect it will be different, right?
But listening to you speak about this internal landscape and all of these things, it's like it sounds as if, man, you can't do anything all day long. You're just busy doing this thing. But it's like, how much time do you like spend actively doing your writing and your painting? Because that's a part of it that
Yeah,
I
yeah.
experience. Like,
I
can you
mean,
do anything else?
no, I've got a full time job and I have a family and people who live in the house here with us. And I have a very full life. So no, this is probably. I mean, some days none of it happens. Um, Other days I might get up and do 40 minutes of it before getting on with other things. Uh, and that might be all I do. Um, the last week I managed to paint like 5 days in a row, five evenings in a row. I mean, my day job is also creative and very demanding. So I end up, it's in the software industry. So I've spent a lot of my creative energy before I get to 5 o'clock in the afternoon every day. And often in the evening, I have nothing. I have no energy I can use for something like painting or even or writing. Uh, so this is something that tends to happen more on weekends and early morning and maybe a couple of evenings a week. So and it's taken many years. It's taken at least the last 5 or 6 years probably to begin on this more interior journey. And the the deepest stuff and the most descriptive stuff has only been the last 18 months. Uh, I mean, it began during around the time of the Pro 2 workshop, actually, the Akimbo workshop. That really opened up a whole bunch of things. You know, there's nothing like finding out from somebody else that, oh, you too, you've done, you do something. It just, we're a social being, and
And
we,
feel
the reality that we make out either in the real world is one that we reinforce with each other constantly. We're used to that. So having that other reality and that other way of being reinforced by others can be incredibly energizing,
mm,
deeply confirming.
mm,
And Pro 2 did that for me.
mm.
There were a couple people. I mean, even the phrase active imagination, I hadn't heard it called that before. I learned it a different way than Anne Marie Cruz did. Anne Marie Cruz is the person I learned the phrase active imagination from at Pro 2. Um, and I had been calling it depth journaling from Ira Progoff's journaling techniques that are based on Carl Jung. So that's where I learned it. And then, and she's got this completely different way of doing it from, I think, a gentleman with the last name Johnston, that she's been, using his instructions to get into that
Was it
space.
Keith Johnson, the
Maybe don't,
improv
I'd have to go back.
person?
I'd have to go back to notes. I have notes on a conversation with Anne Marie where she introduced me to that whole thing. And I was like, that sounds really familiar.
But that's one of the things that I really, really like. In 2014, I did Supercoach Academy, which is something that it's a training that Michael Neal does, and it centers on the understanding of something that's called the three principles, which I won't go into. But the interesting part for me about this is that when I was kind of through this academy 9-month process, the thrilling part for me is then to find what the three principles point to in other things. And I find it in Christianity and in Islam and in
Mhm.
Judaism and in Buddhism and in Hinduism and in philosophy and the Stoics and it's like, and that for me tells me that this is part of that power. This is part
Yep.
of that thing that has always and already been there, that just gets a different name, a different form. It takes on a shape in the Stoic form, in the early Christians, in the Hindus. It's like, but it's the same thing. It's the same
Yes.
life force that's just popping up and given a shape, a form, a texture, a color, a sound that speak to different people. So
Yes.
maybe, if you had found active imagination 20 years ago, you would have gone, nah, not for me. Right. Because maybe that wasn't the thing that would have
That's
attracted.
right.
But if you found it this way, oh, yes. And then somewhere along the line, you can connect those dots, seeing that, oh,
That's
yeah,
right.
it's actually the same thing. And I just love doing that. So after I was through with Supercoach Academy, there's a lot of people who kind of stay in that bubble, uh, which, whatever floats your boat, do that. For me, what floats my boat is to step out of the
Take it out.
bubbles, getting into another bubble and finding, same thing. Jumping out of that one, diving into another bubble, finding it again, and just hopping along, connecting dots and just kind of mapping this common shared, the shared experiences of being human, which I guess for me, because I'm human, is you know, what it is. And
Yeah.
and it's so, like you say, that little thing on a personal level, finding somebody else who does the same thing or who has
Yep.
had the same thought or who has started to step on the same path, it's like, oh, yeah. It's like, I'm not alone. I'm not a total freak. It's
Right.
like, oh, yeah, there's something here. It is really valuable.
Yeah. Yes, it is very valuable.
And I thank you for answering that question of how much time do you spend on this, because I think that's what keeps a lot of people from even stepping into it, just by that little inch, stepping
Yeah.
into the unknown, right?
Yeah.
Because you think that, oh, then I can't do anything else. And it's the same. I do that. I have coach clients who's like, oh, I want to write a book. How much do you write? Well, I don't write. Okay, why don't you write? Well, I don't have time. And I'm like, rubbish. Of course you have time. If nothing else, you have 5 minutes when you're sitting on the toilet every morning,
Right.
right then.
That's
I
right.
don't care.
That's
You
right.
have time. You might not have as much time as you think that you need, but that's not, you know, you make that into an excuse for why you don't dare to
Yes.
step into it by that little inch. It's like,
Yeah.
don't do that. Step in,
Yes. Even
even
if
if
it's just
it's
that. Yeah. Even if it's just that little bit. Right.
even if it's just a little bit. Yeah,
Yeah.
still 5 minutes in the morning, still half an hour in the evening, still an hour on the weekend. Find that thing, and you can do the same thing here. It's like, oh, and when I started blogging, I think this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to start to kind of map down everything that was bubbling inside of me. And I really didn't. I wrote like 10, 12 blog posts in 4 months or something until I stumbled upon Blog 100, which was blog doing dailies, basically, 100
Yep.
days of blogging. Um, then I took that time. That's what gave me the impetus to actually steal that time for myself. If it's, a 5 minute, 10 minute, 15 minutes, just write something, put it out there. And whoa, that has grown a lot since then.
Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah. It becomes a habit. It becomes a practice. Um, and I think you maybe get addicted to it. It becomes a thing you need to do just the same way you need to sleep and eat every day. You feel a hunger for it if you don't do it for a certain amount of time. I used to feel that about painting, but didn't know what it was. So I could go for years without doing it in my 30s and
oh,
40s. And just didn't realize what I was without, but was just grumpy without it. And so, once you create the habit, now if I go more than 3 or 4 days without drawing or painting something, I'm getting positively twitchy. And I could tell, and my family will sometimes tell me, you need to go upstairs and paint.
here's pen and papers,
You
draw.
go work it out. You're driving us crazy. Um, yeah, there's a little bit of that to it after a while. But the other thing is that you become deeply convinced of what you've just been saying, that you can do it in a 5-minute moment here, a 10-minute moment there, and that it's worth it. Because I think that's that's the thing that most people makes them hesitate to even try that. I think there's really more than two things, right? There's resistance. There's, being more in love with the dream of being a writer than actually writing. There's all that. But, if all of those were set aside, he didn't have any of those reasons for not starting. There's just this belief that you really can't do much in 5 minutes. So why to bother? Which, okay, maybe that's true, but something is still better than nothing. And oh, you will be surprised how much that something matters once you start. And that's what the 100 days of blogging, drills deeply into you is that 5 minutes. And if I can have 5 minutes, or I've got this idea. I have to write it down. I will step into a closet and write it down if I need to, but I have to get this written. So you learn that, right? And then the other is I don't think you realize how satisfying even just the 5 minutes will be until you experience it more than once, until it becomes a habit.
And it's interesting. I am doing something that's called data driven fasting at the moment, which is super interesting, right? So, bam, that was teenage son coming back home. Um, I've been playing around with fasting, doing like shortened window of when you eat, etc., etc., and being an upholder, the Gretchen Rubin 4 tendencies. I'm an upholder, which means I can live up to expectations that are internal or external. That works both of it. But so I was kind of pushing myself because I was logging this in this app, right? And then I found it's like, and then I stopped. After 100 days, I stopped because it was like, okay, I don't need to do this anymore. I found some keys that were useful to me. But then I found 2 months ago or something, I found something called data driven fasting, which is so I bought myself a blood glucose measurement device. I prick my finger and I measure. So the thing is to do a baseline to find your level of blood glucose, what it looks like in a day, when you wake up, before you eat, when you're hungry, after you've eaten. You find a trigger. And if you want to lose weight, wait until your blood glucose is below this trigger and you're feeling hungry. Then you eat, right? If it's above, well, if you're
You
really
know,
hungry, okay, eat. But if you're not really hungry, wait half an hour, wait an hour, go for a slow walk, drink some water, until you're under this trigger and eat. And it's been super, super interesting. But what I was going to say was, it has also made me connect dots when it comes to food. So, what makes me satiated? What gives me that sense of being I'm not hungry anymore. I'm satisfied. I can go for a long time. So I've been playing and they help you with this. So they talk a lot about the macronutrients, proteins, carbs, fat, e- energy, what do you need? How much of it is do you need? And what's in, what's where do you find proteins? Green leaves, they're really protein rich. Who knew? It's like I didn't know that. So I've been playing with this and realizing that I've I now one know that when my body sends signals, I kind of I gotten better at understanding what's the signal. What is it that I want?
ah, right. What you
Right?
should eat, you eat.
What I should eat. What does my body say? Please give
I
me.
want this.
I
Huh.
want this, which has been really interesting. But this week I was at a client's office and they had a bun, a cinema bun. It's like, I really shouldn't, but oh well, I had it. And so interesting because the signals that from the system goes, one, I don't really feel as good as I do when I've eaten something that my body wants to eat. Right? This was my mind wanting to eat this. Like it's like, ooh, cake and it's free, right?
Uh
Yay,
huh.
go for it, right? But also that when I eat this combination of fat and carbs, which is what a cinnamon bun is, the entire system just goes, give me more, 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 more. And is so much easier to eat more just to kind of dampen this, I don't know, they
Craving.
call this craving. They call it Lizzie the dinosaur. It's the uh what do you call it? The little reptile brain speaking.
Yeah.
It's Lizzie waking up, right? Saying, give me more, more, more. So, not doing that and eating a good meal based on these macronutrients all of a sudden just has me. I can go without issues. So I've reduced the amount of snacking I do. You know, when you kind of go and, oh, isn't there something good in the cupboard? And you just take something and, eat a lot. So, but it's been that thing where I'm learning. I'm learning the system. I'm learning myself. Again, I'm finding out things about my entire system. And when I do, I want more of that.
Uh-huh.
And when I step out, my system says, this really wasn't a good idea. It's like, okay, but, get on it tomorrow because we really feel better when you do. Um, which is that thing, where you start to do the 5 minutes and you will
Yeah.
discover how important those 5 minutes are for you.
Yeah.
You want them in your life. It's the same thing here. It's like, okay, I'm starting to want to eat in this way because I just feel so much better.
Right. Yeah.
Really interesting.
Yeah. And there's one other thing I would say, I guess, to the folks who have I've always wanted to be a writer, but I don't have time, people. Um, and that's that they may not want to be a writer, but that's the thing they have lodged in their head right now. And if they spend that 5 minutes every day writing, they may not get very far down that road before they realize, oh, it's not actually writing. It's this. Or it is writing, but it's a very specific kind of writing. And actually I can do that in my regular work or whatever. And it's astonishing to me how often we can get fixated, I think, on one idea of what it is that we want or need. And it's close, but it's not really the thing. And only by stepping a little ways toward that, a little ways down that road, do we get to find out, oh, no, not this precisely. Right. And so I would invite them that they maybe need to take some steps down that road just to see if it's real or if there's something else that actually might fit in their life a whole lot better, but this other notion is in the way.
Yeah, which goes with kind of everything. When we get stuck on something, it's blocking. It's a block. Nothing else
Yeah.
can come through because
Yeah.
it's there. You need to
Yeah.
act on it so that it can either lodge somewhere where it fits in
Mhm.
your life or get out of the way, you know, so that the next thing can come saying, it's time to do a Lindy Hop. Yeah, I want to dance, right? Okay, do that then. Try it out. See if or not. And then
Mhm.
which again has us down this movement path of our last conversation.
Yes. It also brings out another thing that I've been thinking about on and off for the last several years, which is this idea about being somewhat single threaded. That we are, um, let's see, I'm back up a little bit. When I was reading Immanuel Kant in college, in a seminar that was probably the course most over my head of the whole time I was there, the chairman of the philosophy department at UNC was the one leading this seminar. It was a graduate level seminar, and I was an undergrad. But there were some things in that I still use to this day. And one of them was he was talking about Immanuel Kant's concept of being temporally discursive. He says people and angels are different from each other because angels are not temporally discursive. Angels have everything all at once. It's all now. It's not. It's just totally different. Whereas for humans, it's one damn thing at a time. That's the way we experience reality. It's single threaded. It's one long string of beads, right? And I have been fascinated with the number of things in our lives that are like that. That are well, as you said, it's like something else is in the way. It's like a tube. There's only one thing in the tube at the moment, and you're not going to get to the thing past that unless you deal with this one. And I've been puzzled from time to time as to why this is, because it doesn't seem like it should have to be like that. We have lots of choices in other aspects of our lives, but there are some things that don't seem like that. They really do seem like you only get one at a time. If you don't deal with this one, you won't get the one behind it. And The creative life for many creatives, for my reading of their diaries and work and thinking and talking with them, and um, often that's the case with the creative life. The creative life is like you get this thing to make, and until you've done at least something with it, you may not have to even finish it, but you have to do something with it. You ain't getting anything else.
Mm.
Nothing else is coming until this one's done. Um, and that's been puzzling to me that it should be that way, but it does seem to be, at least at least sometimes, and for some people.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what is the
Well,
rationale for that.
yeah, I don't know. Now that I've got, I do a decent amount of writing. I'm even doing a bunch of creative writing at the moment. Um, uh, a kind of interesting fiction that I'm writing. Um, and when I paint and we garden and landscape the yard. Uh, I cook. These are all creative endeavors in different ways. I find that each one of them has its own tube,
Too.
its
Mhm.
own, its own one thing at a time. They're
Mm.
sometimes connected to each other. And that's what's really interesting is when I get stuck in one because I'm not acting on something in one of the other ones because something overlapped and there's a something that has to be honored here before this can be satisfied on this other one. Doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it's fascinating. But in each one of these endeavors, I have a choice about whether I paint today or whether I write now, but when I'm in that genre or that discipline, one thing at a time. Even if I
Yeah,
have
and it's
even if I have multiple paintings going at once, which I sometimes can, it's more a matter of I took this one out of the chute.
yeah. So
I
this is the one.
I got it this far. And, oh, look, there's another one in the chute now.
Mm.
So now I could do them both at once and I can
Mhm.
start this next one and come back to this one. But the new one coming in, I can't, if I don't do something with each new one, I will not get another one.
No, no,
It's like
present. If
that.
you don't do that new one that's waiting,
There
it
won't
won't
be a
go
second,
away.
there won't be
No.
a second new one, right? I
Yeah.
don't usually have two notions at a time that are not acted on
Yeah.
yet. They have to be at least brought out of the chute and put on a table and
Yeah.
something with
Yeah.
them. Then the
Yeah.
next one shows up, right? So I've had as many as 7 or 8 paintings going at once. And I know people like Titian had 40 or 50 paintings going at once. Almost all turned to the wall so that he wasn't seeing them at any one time. But I wonder if he also got them only one at a time, right? They didn't come like 5 at a time. It's like, oh, wait, take some notes on these 5 things. It's because, like, I'm going to have to get to them all, but I don't want to lose any. I think there are people for whom there are comes to them that way, but that's not been my experience. It's been one at a time.
Which is, I mean, since August of 2020, I've been doing my depth writings about shame, and I'm up to almost 150,000 words there. I haven't written a lot of other things. I haven't been writing, I haven't been blogging a lot at all. And most of the things that I've written have been that. And I have like blog posts that I should do that I just don't do because I write this thing instead.
Right.
And I haven't thought about it in this way, but it kind of it kind of feels right. It feels like this is because this is where the energy is at the moment for me. So it's like
Right.
it also requires an active stepping out of that to do something else that is more on the should list, honestly, for me,
Yeah.
than the I want to list. This
Yeah.
is the I want to. This is the stream of I want to. This is where I want to spend my time. Um,
And for those of us who have spent, like you and I, so much of our lives following shoulds,
yeah,
when you get to a place where you realize how much pain and harm that is caused to
yeah,
yourself and oftentimes to others around you as well, I know certainly it's the case for me. then you have an urge and I think some intelligence around wanting to pursue something differently,
Yeah.
and should become something you almost avoid, at least for a while. Uh, so I definitely understand that.
Yeah, there's been a lot of shooting and there still is some shooting, but a lot less. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
a lot less.
And again, like everything we've been talking about, right? Even just taking a small portion of your day or a few parts of your life and making them completely about spontaneity and
Yeah.
about want and desire instead of should, um, can shed all sorts of light into other parts of your life, and you begin to modify them in ways that are helpful,
Yeah.
healthy. Um, it's another one of these things like the writing, right? Where people feel like, well, I can't just stop doing all the things I should do. My life would fall apart. And it's like, nothing is that black or white, dude. You don't have to make everything. Just change a few. Well, I don't know which ones to. All right, then don't change anything about your life. Find some little thing to add that's new and unsullied and untouched by should, right? And it could be like you're dancing, right? Do something that's just purely for the fun of it, purely for the, and then see how that modifies
Yes.
naturally. It'll tell you where you can make other changes then that are a little more safe to make, or that will fit more naturally into the pile of shoulds that maybe your life is made out of. You can start to untangle that a little bit.
Yeah. I gave a talk in Swedish in the beginning of October where I spoke about musts. I spoke about, or rather, I challenged people to look at their lives and see what they could remove in order to make their life richer. Normally, you would think you add something to make it
Yep.
richer. You add a yearly subscription to the opera, or a summer cottage, or a boat, or, 3 months in Thailand, or whatever it is that you add, a second house, or a second car, or a fifth car, or whatever it is. But the challenge was, what can you remove that will make your life richer? And kind of what I was pointing to were the musts and the shoulds. You know, maybe you got yourself a boat because you so love being out on the ocean, but now that you have it, it has turned into a ton of shoulds. We should really use the boat more often next year because this year we almost didn't use it at all. And we really have to bring it out of the water now because winter is coming. And, it's like, all of those things. It's like, I'm not saying don't get a boat or a second house or a summer house, but thinking about it and actually looking at, what does it give me? How does it serve me in my life? What does it bring? And what does it remove? And just the words that I use around it, whatever it is, I have to write. No, but you get to.
You get to, yes.
It's like something completely different. So just it was, and that talk, it was recorded and it was just released. I just saw it last yesterday. So I was rewatching it and it was interesting. It's in Swedish, but it was like, it's not, it's a good thing. Just know and take stock. See what's there. One of all the things that I do that I have are still of service in some way to me and the
Yeah.
life that I want to live, how I want, and does it help me show up in life in the way I want to show up in life? There's a lot of questions that you can ask. Uh, and
Yeah.
just taking the time to do that now and again, that's a good
Yeah.
one.
The One of the silver linings in the pandemic and all the shutting down and all the our household is still very shut down. Um, there's a new variant starting now, so it's going to be, who knows? But one of the things we've noticed as a family is that we, of course, have spent no time in restaurants. We have not traveled much. When we travel to places where we can be very quiet, alone, and secluded, because we have to maintain some level of quarantine is really the only safety that's sufficient for some of the health issues that we have at the house.
Mm.
And the result is that because we've not done all these things, we've not taken trips, we've not gone shopping, we haven't been inside a store in I don't know how long, right? We pick up things curbside. It's a pain in the neck to arrange and order it ahead. No spontaneous purchases that way, right? Because we've taken all those things that took up lots of time and energy and were very enjoyable, but they're not there anymore. There's all this space, this time where they used to be. And there's all this mental and emotional energy that doesn't get spent on that suddenly is like footloose. And it does different things now because it's left to its own devices. It's given me an appreciation for and an interest in the kind of boredom that children had during summer vacations and things when there were no devices and there wasn't any media, there wasn't the internet. And therefore, and parents didn't have the kinds of playrooms full of toys that most kids in America, especially nowadays, have. And, we had a few things and we had the outside and we went outdoors and invented stuff to do because we were bored. And I look back on that now and I think I can remember how that boredom felt and it was not pleasant sometimes, but I can remember all the things that it led to. And many of them were very rich. And that's what the pandemic has been reminding me of is that because all of a sudden we find ourselves with, it's another weekend. We've only got the same 5 or 6 places we can go walk where it's lonely enough. And we're, are we tired of these places yet? And we find out not really. No, what we've been doing is noticing more deeply why we love them, or we've been connecting with them in a way that we wouldn't if we had to go back every week for like 5 weeks in a row. Um, so that's the big silver lining. And it's very much in line with your talk. You know, we've had to remove things
Yeah.
we were forced to. And it's made our lives richer in some ways. And that's been great to find. And I'm not sure we would have found it if we hadn't been forced.
No, I think it. I mean, on some level you could, but
Sure. You have to choose.
you would have to choose, and I think it's a choice few people would make or were making.
Yeah.
There are people who do make that choice, regardless of like pandemic and lockdowns and whatnot. But most people, which also is interesting because it's like, you know, people who loses their jobs, and I'm not speaking pandemic wise. I'm speaking like, general, or you break your leg, you have to be,
Right.
off from work for a month or something. It's like
Right.
those breaks, those shifts, those traumas, because they can be traumas too. It's like so many times, not always, not at all, but so many times they do. Again, there's that possibility of an opening. Let's put it that way. There's a possibility of an opening to
Yes.
seeing, experiencing, finding out something that you did not have before.
Yeah.
What
Yes.
else is there?
Yes.
What else is possible? Um, and I mean, I think many of us live kind of these 80% lives where, it's okay. It's good enough. It's like the marriage, the work, the kids, the social gatherings, the whatnot, right? It's like it's okay. Which means that if it was really bad, you'd do something about it, right? But it's not. It's okay. It's 80% good, right? And then you don't have the drive to what could make this 100% good, right? What would it take for my marriage, my work, my whatever to be 100% good? But it's good enough so you don't. If it
Right.
were down at 10%, man, you'd
You'd
be
change it.
doing something, right? You'd change something. Uh, so it's and at the same time as I'm saying this, I don't want people to think that, or you for that matter, to think that it's like I'm not an adrenaline junkie. I'm not it has to happen all the time, all the time, all the time. I can't spend any time alone, or, that's not the 100% that I'm not sort of speaking about energy peaking in all levels at the same time, constantly, forever and ever. It's like, oh my God, no, thank you, not that. Uh, but, but there's something about this notion of well, I guess it is kind of getting stuck in a rut,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Settling.
Settling for, and it's
Yeah.
like, so that's why I settle for dreaming about becoming a writer rather than actually taking 5 minutes every day to write. It's like it's a type of
Yeah.
settling for,
Yeah.
where it's like, no, that won't happen. So I won't even do anything to try it on, to see what might be there. Um,
I would go further and say that many of us, because of the 80% life you described, the 80% okay, we won't even let ourselves realize that we feel that 20% gap
no,
because we don't want to make the effort to close it. So we don't even let ourselves acknowledge it's there.
no, we
So,
imagine it's 100%.
right? So I think there's and all of this gets back to the same thing. It's about opening still, right? It's about opening yourself up to listen to where there are gaps or listen to little restlessnesses or things that you maybe would like to satisfy or places you'd like to explore. You have to be open though to the fact that that's going to demand potentially some action from you in order to satisfy that. The fact that you even find out or realize fully that it's there may literally draw you right into trying to do something about it. And there's some risk always entailed in making those kinds of changes. Your 80% could suddenly change into less than that when you try to add one more thing and it kind of collapses on you a little, or somebody else in the relationship doesn't like it. But the idea that we could open ourselves up to find more, ask for more, we don't like to ask. Many of us, especially, right, are not askers. I'm not. I have a terrible time asking anybody for anything. Um, there, all kind of vulnerability is involved in this. I mean, this gets back again to all those really uncomfortable emotions for men in particular, right? There's so much reward though in doing that, but it's not very easy or natural. Not the way we've been socialized, not the way we've lived our lives, not the way our heads have been put together. It requires reassembling some things and it requires stepping out of our usual habits and doing something else for a while, even if it's for 5 minutes each morning, whatever. But it's again, it's about opening. It's about a type of awareness, letting yourself become aware that, oh, there's this little bit of dissatisfaction.
The
Is it a,
chase.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Or it's a hunger, it's a gap. You know, I'm not, my plate never has that on it. My body wants that. I'd never put it
Yeah.
on my plate.
No, precisely,
I will, I
precisely.
put the other 80% on my plate. My body's 80% happy, but
Yeah, not
they're all,
100.
they're all very similar and they all require us to pay attention to that little cry of desire or keening that might be going on in some part of us that we would just as soon shut up because it's going to, once we acknowledge it, then we'll have to do something about it.
I did a digital Tankespjärn set up with a coach client of mine where every week, the first time around it was every day and then it was every week. I sent a piece of Tankespjärn, like tailor made for this person, right? And I would get responses, written responses, and then I'd do something and maybe continue on a couple of weeks on that same thread, and then I'd throw something else in. And one of the things that I threw in was, what's chafing in your life? Tell me about these. I want to know where your chafes are. And my client did not want to go there. You know, signed up for Tankespjärn, absolutely sure. But just that chafing one, ooh, is like, no, please. Because it is kind of like, you open it and it will just pop up and you can't kind of keep it down and turn it off again. Which turned into a really interesting conversation between us, a back and forth for a couple of weeks on this thing. What's the resistance to even
Right.
looking at the chafing, right?
Right.
So it turned out really, really well, but it was just that thing. It's like, look at the chafing because those are valuable. Those areas are, you know, they are low hanging fruit in a sense. There's something there. And maybe some of them are, wouldn't take that much to tweak, to
No,
to,
they maybe wouldn't. They maybe
maybe
wouldn't.
they wouldn't, it's like, okay, you can take off your shoe, you can turn it over so that the little pebble leaves, and then there's no chafing anymore.
Ri
That
right.
might be a good idea
It
rather
could be
than
that
just
simple.
keep on walking and getting, a
Blister.
a blister, and then it turns into a wound, and then it won't heal. It's like, yeah, or, get at the chafing at the beginning before, when it's just uncomfortable, before it started to turn into a blister, before it started to bleed and whatnot. Uh, and it
Yeah.
is kind of on the same line of, what can you remove from your life to make it richer? It's kind of
Yeah.
along the same
Yeah.
line.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. They're all a kind of listening.
yeah.
We would, I think, rather we're more comfortable running and, taking things on pell mell. I mean, the idea that you make your life richer by acquiring more possessions is just another form of running to me. When you mentioned that, that's the image I get in my head was like, people running headlong to the store to buy this and that. Um, and the not doing that and standing still kind of first lets your demons catch up. The ones that you've been running away from, it lets at least some of them catch up. And then you have to deal with them. And then you find out maybe they're not so bad. And maybe even like in the case of anxiety, you've discovered that they're a guy in a green bathrobe with mismatched socks, and he's actually okay. He's a little nerdy, and he's actually kind of a friend. Now, anxiety, and I sit down regularly now and go through the Knucklebones, and it's a friendly encounter. And I've actually thanked him.
Yeah.
I actually embraced it once. I was so grateful for the stuff that had come out of the Knucklebone section. So you can get more used to this if you get started. And again, that's another theme, I guess, of our talk today is that just start. Just
Just
take
start.
a few minutes. Just give it a beginning,
Yeah.
and you'll be surprised where it'll go on its own. So,
And that is also, in this day and age, the notion of starting and maybe not being good at it right away.
oh man,
Precisely. It's
oh
like, I
man, yes.
cannot. It's like, cannot, because if I start something, I can only start something that I know I will be good at the first time I do it. And it's like, oh, that's just such a dumb cultural notion, but it is a really
Oh, it's a
strong
really strong one.
cultural notion.
Yes, it is. Yes, it
Ah,
is. It's also a strong individual personal notion, especially for those of us who are perfectionists. It's very, very hard to take on something that you've never done before. My late father-in-law, one of the most important lessons he ever taught me was that one by example, because he would try anything, anything at all, if he thought it was interesting. And I watched him try things in his 60s and late 50s that he was like totally unprepared to do well
mm,
and get knocked on his ass trying to do it and laugh.
Yeah.
because it was so much fun to be that off balance. And I was flabbergasted. Here's a man who's very accomplished in his career, a person who's very much in control of things in his life, a thin, a very reserved and not with his emotions. He was a very open man emotionally. He was a very expressive of his emotions. He was a incredible example as a father. But a man who was very reserved and very, an ex-military man, very, tall, upright stature. And he loved to get knocked off balance. And I found that flabbergasting the first couple of times I encountered it in him. And then after that, it was like, no, this is great. And I've had a terrible time letting myself do it most of my life. But I often think back to those examples and I can let myself go and I can let myself do something that I won't do perfectly the first time. Um, that's what keeps me from painting half the time, Elena, is the fact that I get a notion for a particular painting and I'm not sure I can carry it off and I don't even start it. And the thing is that whole little quick merry-go-round move mentally is so natural that I don't even know I've done it. I just know that I no longer have the urge to paint that painting. And I have to come back. And this is part of the beauty of the one thing at a time is that nothing else is coming.
Precisely,
So I
precisely.
keep
It's
coming back to this
waiting there
painting
for
and
you
going,
to pick it up. Yeah.
I keep coming back to it, and eventually I'll notice that I'm making that move and I'll be like, of course I don't know how to paint that, but isn't that the fun? Isn't the fun going to be that I get to discover something new because I'm trying something I don't know how to do? You know, that's I think where all the emotion was in that your comments about that being such a dumb cultural move. It's like, how do you ever grow into anything new if you're not gonna right? So, thank God our culture and many people in it have not behaved that way. Otherwise, there wouldn't be anything new. We would just be doing the same few things we always did well, which probably weren't much more than climbing trees and picking fruit.
We've come a long way since then,
We
that's for
have come a
sure.
long way.
Yeah. Maybe that's a good place to wrap this up.
Yeah, time wise, I need to wrap it up. So, yep. Yeah.
Thanks for today, Steve. I'm wondering though, have you gotten yourself a bar to hang on? I don't see
No,
any
I
in
do
the
not. No,
roof.
that's the one thing on your list that I have not done anything with yet is the hanging piece. I think of it often though, because so it's very much on my mind. I will do something with it eventually. Um, there's a there are it's the holidays, so there's just every time it's time to do any kind of a chore, it's like there's a long list. You should be doing something off this list. So, but when the holidays are over in January, it usually gets very quiet and there's not a
Mm.
lot of that kind of stuff going on. The gardens are all asleep. And I think that's probably when I'll be able to turn my attention to figuring out where in the house I could put something strong enough for me to hang from.
Good.
But I definitely want to do it.
And in the meantime, there's actually a place that you can hang from right now, and
Mhm.
that's behind you. You can take a door post, a door frame, and
This,
kind of no, the one in there, that one. No,
this,
well, your
and that's
closet,
right here.
yeah. You don't have to go up. You take it on the side, and you just hang from the side of
Oh,
it.
oh, so
So,
that works too. So even
like
sideways hanging works.
you can do that. It's like I'm hanging. It's not the same, but it does give your shoulders something else. So just grab a hold of
Oh,
of the side of a door frame and just let yourself go. That's a start. That's a starting hanging place.
see, and that fits
Uh,
our theme of, begin small, just 5 minutes. See, once I start doing that, I'll probably then have an itch to do more, and that'll make the
that'll make the
true
hanging
hanging
bar
bar probably
come.
happen because then I'll be curious about, well, if just this gives me that, then what would this give me?
Yeah, that's perfect. Well, a lovely Saturday.
And you have a lovely weekend. Um, Thank you for this. This was a great way to start my day, and I look forward to the next.